The earliest known forms of bowling date back to ancient Egypt, with wall drawings depicting bowling being found in a royal Egyptian tomb, along with miniature pins and balls, all dated around 3200 BC. About 2,000 years ago, in the Roman Empire, a similar game evolved between Roman legionaries entailing the tossing of stone objects as close as possible to other stone objects, which eventually evolved into Italian bocce, or outdoor bowling. In 1366, the first official mention of bowling in England was made, when King Edward III banned it as a distraction to archery practice. English King Henry VIII was an avid bowler. In 1511, he banned bowling for the lower classes and imposed a levy for private lanes to limit them to the wealthy. Protestant Reformation founder Martin Luther set the number of pins, which varied from 3 to 17, at 9. In 1819, New York writer Washington Irving made the first mention of 9-pin bowling in American literature in his story Rip Van Winkle. The revolutions of 1848 resulted in accelerated German immigration to the U.S., reaching 5 million by 1900, bringing their love of beer and bowling with them. By the late 19th century they made New York City a center of bowling. Nine-pin was the origin of modern bowling, created in Europe. It was brought to America where it was very popular from colonial times until the 1830s, when several cities in the United States banned nine-pin bowling out of moral panic over the supposed destruction of the work ethic, gambling, and organized crime. 10-pin bowling is said to have been invented in order to meet the letter of these laws. Ten-pin bowling arose in the early 1800s as an alternative to nine-pin bowling, with truly standardized regulations not being agreed on until nearly the end of that century. After the development of automated mechanical pinsetters, the sport enjoyed a golden age in the mid-20th century. Candlepin bowling is a variation of bowling that is played primarily in the Canadian Maritime Provinces and the New England region of the United States. It is played with a handheld-sized ball and tall, narrow pins that resemble candles, hence the name. The International Candlepin Bowling Association (ICBA) website states that candlepin bowling was first played in 1880 in Worcester, Massachusetts, thought to have been developed by Justin White, owner of a billiards and bowling hall. A 1987 Sports Illustrated article stated the game was invented in 1881 in that town by one John J. Imanzi, a billiards player, who is recognized for standardizing the game. In 1906, Manzi created the National Duckpin and Candlepin Congress, which regulated ball size, pin shape and size, and lane surface characteristics, facilitating formation of leagues and other competitions. In 1947, lawyers Howard Dowd and Lionel Barrow overcame the need for human pinsetters by inventing the first automatic candlepin pinsetter, called the Bowlmore, the two inventors receiving a patent that was issued in 1956. The origin of duckpin bowling has been disputed. A commonly recited assertion is that the sport began in Baltimore around 1900, at a bowling, billiards, and pool hall owned by future Baseball Hall of Famers John McGraw and Wilbert Robinson, both of the old, 1882 to 1899, Baltimore Orioles. However, research has since found references to duckpin dating to the early 1890s in New Haven, Boston, and Lowell, Massachusetts. Author Howard W. Rosenberg wrote in 2005 that his research showed the sport was around, at least as of 1894, and probably well before that, with former Duckpin News editor Stacy Carton stating in a 2016 publication that Rosenberg found an 1892 reference to duckpin in the Boston Globe. In 1905, a variant called rubber band duckpins was introduced in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area by William Worthel, in which the pins are circled with hard rubber bands to increase rebound action in collisions, and therefore scoring. Worthel observed bowlers wasting their third ball as well as flying pins injuring pin boys, so, according to a defunct publication called The Ducks, Worthel added the rubber band to increase scoring. Five-pin bowling was invented in 1909 by Thomas Ryan in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Ryan was born in 1872. He was a good baseball player, who almost made the Orioles as a pitcher. Instead, he moved to Toronto where he ran a pool hall on Yonge Street for 15 years. Then, in 1905, he opened Canada's first 10-pin bowling alley, called the Toronto Bowling Club. Ryan would create this new form of bowling in response to customers who complained that the 10-pin game was too strenuous. His customers complained that the 16-pound bowling ball was too heavy and that the game took too long to finish. So, Ryan experimented with other bowling games, smaller balls, less pins, and a new scoring system. At first, the new lighter pins would fly around too much, sometimes even out the window. So that was why Ryan came up with the idea to add a heavy rubber band around the pins. Eventually he had created a new form of bowling altogether, a truly Canadian version of the game. Ryan never patented this new sport, but the next year he began opening a franchise of 5-pin bowling alleys all across Canada. He tried his luck in other businesses after this success. He bought a hotel, but prohibition made it unprofitable. He bought a large house and turned it into an antique store. He became part of the Toronto Sports Committee and helped overturn an 85-year-old rule that prohibited sports on Sundays. He also judged the Miss Toronto pageant. He remained a bachelor until the age of 82 when he married his secretary. He passed away 7 years later, on November 19, 1961 in Toronto. He was inducted into the Canada Sports Hall of Fame in 1971. Five-pin bowling was one of 4 sports featured on the Canadian Inventions Sports Series issued by Canada Post Stamps on August 10, 2009. And in 2007, five-pin bowling was ranked number 4 during the CBC miniseries The Greatest Canadian Invention. In the 1880s, Brunswick Corporation of Chicago, Illinois, maker of billiard tables, began making bowling balls, pins, and wooden lanes to sell to taverns installing bowling alleys. On September 9, 1895, the modern standardized rules for 10-pin bowling were established in New York City by the New American Bowling Congress. In 1908, the now oldest surviving bowling alley for the 10-pin sport was opened in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the basement of the Holler House Tavern, containing the oldest sanctioned lanes in the United States. The first women's bowling tournament took place in 1917 in St. Louis, Missouri. In 1921, the first Ladies' Bowling League was formed. In 1927, the Canadian Bowling Association was founded. From 1920 to 1933, Prohibition in the U.S. caused bowling alleys to disassociate from saloons, turning bowling into a family game and encouraging women bowlers. In 1946, AMF unveiled the pin setter, known as the automatic pin spotter, to the public during the American Bowling Congress tournament in Buffalo. By 1952, American Machine and Foundry, AMF, of Brooklyn, New York, began marketing automatic pin setter machines. This eliminated the need for pinboys and caused bowling to rocket in popularity, making the 1950s the decade of the bowler. This led to the golden age of 10-pin bowling, in which professional bowlers made salaries rivaling those of baseball, football, and hockey players. This ended in the late 1970s. In 1964, Mr. Bowling, Don Carter, became the first athlete to sign a $1 million endorsement contract, a multi-year deal with Ebonite International. On February 27, 1982, Earl Anthony won the Toledo Trust PBA National Championship, becoming the first bowler to reach $1 million in career earnings. On September 18, 1988, the 1988 Summer Olympics in Seoul, South Korea, featured 10-pin bowling as a demonstration sport. On August 2, 1991, in Havana, Cuba, 10-pin bowling became an international medal-level sport for the first time at the 1991 Pan American Games, and continues to this day. What is the future of bowling? Only time will tell.